They say success is the best revenge, but first you have to be seen to be successful. I spent my life as a ghost in my own family, the afterthought daughter overshadowed by my golden brother, Liam. "You're not cut out for wealth," he told me that Thanksgiving night, bourbon on his breath, superiority in his smile. "You're soft." I said nothing as I loaded the dishwasher with plates still warm from the dinner celebrating his latest venture. My parents hadn't even asked about the six-figure client I'd just landed. They never did. I stared at my reflection in the dark kitchen window, invisible Harper Wilson, the family disappointment, and made myself a promise. I would build an empire in silence. I would become someone they couldn't ignore. And one day, when the moment was perfect, when Liam was at the absolute pinnacle of his smugness, I would reveal just how blind they'd all been. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because I needed them to witness exactly who I'd become while they weren't looking. They thought wealth wasn't for people like me? Fine. I'd show them what people like me were truly capable of. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. I've always been good at being invisible. Not in the comic book superhero way, but in the way that makes family photos look awkward when someone finally remembers to include you. Growing up as Harper Wilson meant living in the enormous shadow cast by my brother, Liam. The Wilson family had a son, and everything revolved around him. Every conversation at dinner, every weekend plan, every proud parental moment, it all circled back to Liam. My parents didn't mean to create this imbalance, at least I don't think they did. But intentions don't change outcomes, and the outcome was that I became the ghost of our family, present but rarely seen. I remember the day I realized this wasn't going to change. I was 12, standing next to my science fair project on renewable energy that had just won first place. My blue ribbon felt heavy in my hands as I waited by the school entrance for my parents. They were 40 minutes late. When they finally rushed in, my mother's eyes were bright with excitement, but not for me. "Harper, hurry up. Liam just got home with his regional football trophy. We need to get back for the celebration dinner." I clutched my ribbon tighter. I won first place. My father glanced at my project, giving it a cursory nod. "That's nice, honey. But this is a huge deal for your brother. He's going places. You should learn from him." The drive home was filled with chatter about Liam's game-winning touchdown. My ribbon lay forgotten on the back seat, and by the time we arrived home, it had fallen to the floor. No one noticed when I didn't bring it inside. High school only widened the gap. While I buried myself in advanced computer science courses and coding competitions, Liam became our town's golden boy. Football captain, prom king, the works. I'd see his picture in the local paper while I quietly built my first app in my bedroom, headphones on to block out the sound of my parents raving about his latest accomplishment downstairs. "Harper is so different," my mother would say to her friends over coffee. I could hear them from the kitchen where I was grabbing a snack before heading back to my coding. "I just don't understand what she does with all that computer stuff." Not very social, is she? By the time we reached college, our roles were set in stone. Liam, the achiever. Harper, the afterthought. Family dinners were exercises in invisibility. My parents would spend the first hour drilling Liam about his business classes, his internships, his networking events. Then, almost as an obligation, someone would turn to me. "So, what exactly is it you do again, Harper?" my father would ask, his tone suggesting that whatever it was couldn't possibly be important. I'd explain my software development work or the freelance coding I was doing, only to watch his eyes glaze over before he'd turn back to Liam with renewed interest. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving my senior year of college. I'd been quiet through most of dinner, listening to Liam boast about his new startup idea, some app that would revolutionize social networking, or whatever buzzword he was throwing around that week. "I've decided," my father announced, tapping his glass for attention, "to invest in Liam's new venture. It's time we put some family backing behind all that potential." My mother clapped her hands together. That's wonderful. My son, the entrepreneur. I stabbed at my mashed potatoes, saying nothing. I'd just landed my biggest client yet for my consulting work, but I knew better than to mention it. As everyone stood to move to the living room for dessert, my father patted my shoulder. Harper, help your mother with the dishes, would you? That night, Liam cornered me in the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, watching me load the dishwasher. You know, he said, swirling an expensive whiskey my father had poured him, some people just have it and some don't. Money is everything in this world, sis. Some of us were born to win. He took a sip, eyes gleaming over the rim of the glass. And some of us, well, you know. I said nothing, just methodically arranged the plates. Don't take it personally, he continued, mistaking my silence for hurt rather than simmering resolve. You're just not cut out for wealth. You're soft. Too concerned with your little coding projects instead of seeing the big picture. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, my mother came downstairs to find me still up, working on my laptop at the kitchen table. Honey, she sighed, tightening her robe around her waist, don't you think it's time you settled down? Get a stable job, maybe? Something reliable. She emphasized the word like my software consultancy was a childhood phase I needed to outgrow. Not everyone can be like your brother. I know, Mom, I said quietly, not looking up. I'm not trying to be. What she didn't know was that I'd just closed a deal that would pay more than my father's annual salary. What she didn't know was that I'd just put a down payment on my first apartment. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had plans. Big ones. That night, after my mother went back to bed, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Plain Harper Wilson, the invisible daughter. The family afterthought. You'll see me one day, I whispered to my reflection, watching my eyes harden with determination. But not until I'm ready. The following morning, I slipped out early, before anyone else was awake. I left a note saying I had a work emergency, which wasn't entirely untrue. I did have work to do, just not the kind they imagined. Back in my tiny rented room near campus, I pulled up the paperwork for my new apartment. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom in a decent area of the city, but it was mine, paid for with money I'd earned. Not family money, not connections. Just hard work and skill they'd never bothered to notice. Liam's words from the night before echoed in my head, "You're not cut out for wealth." I opened my laptop and looked at my bank balance. It wasn't millions, but it was growing steadily. My client list was expanding. My reputation in certain tech circles was building. All under the radar, all while playing the role of disappointing daughter at home. Maybe Liam was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for wealth, not the flashy, show-off-your-money kind he valued. But I was definitely cut out for something. And for the first time, I allowed myself to truly imagine what that something might become. They have no idea, I said to myself, a smile spreading across my face as I began to code. The next time I saw my family was at Christmas. Nothing had changed. Liam dominated the conversation with tales of his startup progress. My father beamed with pride. My mother fussed over him. I played my part, the quiet daughter who was still figuring things out. No one asked about my business. No one noticed my new confidence. And that was exactly how I wanted it. My apartment became my laboratory. During the day, I consulted for clients, building websites, troubleshooting systems, the standard work that paid the bills. But at night, that's when the real magic happened. For months, I lived off of ramen and determination. My living room transformed into a nest of cables, monitors, and empty coffee cups. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I was building something bigger than myself, an AI security system that could predict and neutralize cyber threats before they materialized. "You're insane," said Trevor, one of the few people who knew what I was working on. He was a former classmate who'd become my sounding board. "You know that, right? This is the kind of project entire teams at Google spend years developing." "I'm not trying to be Google," I replied, not looking up from my keyboard. I'm trying to be better. 3 months in, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were perpetually bloodshot from staring at code. My apartment had become less of a home and more of a cave. But the algorithm was working. It was detecting patterns human analysts missed, predicting breaches before they occurred in my test environments. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. I'd been running simulations all night when my phone rang. Is this Harper Wilson? The voice belonged to a man I didn't recognize. Yes, I answered cautiously. This is James Blackwell, CEO of Sentinel Security. One of our analysts came across your presentation at the Underground DevCon last month. We'd like to talk about licensing your predictive model. I gripped the phone tighter. How did you get this number? He chuckled. In our business, finding contact information is the easy part. It's finding people with your talent that's difficult. The meeting took place in a sleek downtown office. I wore the only business attire I owned, a simple black dress that had seen better days. But I walked in with my head high, carrying a laptop that contained code worth more than the building we were sitting in. 6 figures, Blackwell said after the demonstration. Exclusive license for 1 year. I almost accepted on the spot. 6 figures was more money than I'd ever seen. But something in me, the part that remembered every dismissive look from my family, made me pause. Non-exclusive. And double your offer. Blackwell raised an eyebrow. We both knew it was a bold counteroffer. But we also both knew what my system could do. Done, he said after a long pause. I signed the papers that afternoon. By evening, I was standing in my apartment, staring at my bank account balance in disbelief. More money than my parents thought I'd make in 5 years. More than Liam had raised for his startup. And I told no one. At the next family dinner, I played the same role I always had. When asked about work, I mumbled something about freelance projects and quickly changed the subject. I watched Liam boast about investor meetings. I saw my father's proud glances. I felt my mother's concerned looks. Harper, dear, she said as I helped clear the table, your cousin Amanda is working at that department store now. They're always hiring if you're interested. I just smiled. I'll keep that in mind, Mom. Building a company in secret requires strategy. With my new funding, I rented a small office space in the city under a company name no one would connect to me. I handpicked a team, 3 brilliant developers fresh out of college who were overlooked by the big tech firms, a marketing guru who believed in working smarter rather than louder, and Evan Thompson. Evan was the wild card. In his 60s, he'd been a pioneer in cybersecurity before most people knew what it was. He'd made his fortune, lost it, made it again, then stepped away from the spotlight to mentor the next generation. Most people in tech thought he'd retired to some island. Why me? I asked during our first meeting, genuinely baffled that someone of his caliber would join my fledgling operation. He studied me over his reading glasses. Because you remind me of me. Hungry, smart, and with something to prove. He leaned forward. And because what you're building will change the industry if you play it right. Evan became more than a team member. He became the father figure I'd never really had, one who actually understood what I was building and valued what I could do. Meanwhile, Liam's startup was floundering. I heard about it through family gossip and the occasional industry news. His initial app had failed to gain traction. He'd pivoted twice. But on social media and at family gatherings, everything was still crushing it and exceeding expectations. He drove a car he couldn't afford and lived in a loft that drained his dwindling resources. Our parents continued to prop him up, financially and emotionally. I listened to my father talk about temporary cash flow issues and watched my mother defend Liam's visionary approach that just needed time to mature. Under Evan's guidance, I began expanding beyond security software. We acquired a small data analytics firm that complemented our core technology. Then a machine learning startup with promising patents, but cash flow problems. Each acquisition was structured through shell companies. Each success kept quiet from the public eye. I operated under a business pseudonym, rarely attended industry events, and when I did, I stayed in the background. Then came the opportunity. Titan Tech is on the market, Evan told me one morning, dropping the file on my desk. They're not advertising it, but they're looking for quiet buyers. I flipped through the numbers. Titan Tech was a mid-sized security firm with excellent tech, but outdated business practices. They were worth 3 times what we had in liquid assets. We can't afford this, I said. No, Evan agreed. But we could, with the right investors. I don't want outside money, I said firmly. The minute we bring in venture capital, we lose control. Evan smiled, that sly look he got when he was about to teach me something. Who said anything about venture capital? 2 days later, I discovered Liam was in talks to acquire Titan Tech. With our parents' money and some desperate investors, he was positioning it as his big comeback. He didn't have enough, but he was close. The acquisition would legitimize his business reputation and give him the foothold he needed. I sat in my office late that night, staring at the financial models. We could make an offer. It would stretch us to breaking point, but we could do it. The question was, should we? This isn't about your brother, Evan said, somehow reading my thoughts as he handed me a coffee. Isn't it? No. It's about whether Titan Tech fits our strategy. If it does, we move. If it doesn't, we walk away. Business isn't personal. But that was the thing. With family, business is always personal. I made the offer the next day. All cash, no financing contingencies. We emptied our reserves, leveraged our assets, and put everything on the line. It was aggressive, bold, and slightly terrifying. Titan Tech accepted within hours. The same week, I met Leo. He wasn't part of the plan. He was just the financial analyst who kept sending me insightful questions about our public filings, the few we couldn't avoid. After the 3rd email, I agreed to meet him for coffee, expecting either a job seeker or a corporate spy. What I found instead was someone refreshingly direct. He saw through the shell companies. He'd connected dots few others could. And rather than being impressed with himself, he seemed impressed with me. You've built something remarkable, he said. Completely under the radar. Is this the part where you threaten to expose me if I don't hire you? I asked, only half joking. He laughed, genuinely amused. No, this is the part where I ask you to dinner because I find you fascinating. The business you've built is impressive, but I suspect the woman behind it is even more so. Leo became my sounding board, then my confidant, then something more. Unlike anyone else in my life, he never expected me to be less than I was. He never needed me to shrink to make space for his ego. In fact, he seemed to delight in watching me grow more powerful, more confident. Your family, he asked one night as we worked late in my office, do they know what you've built here? I shook my head, continuing to review contracts. Are you ever going to tell them? I looked up then. One day, when it will mean something. Leo didn't push. That was one of the things I loved about him. He understood the weight of family expectations, the need to define success on your own terms. A month after the Titan Tech acquisition, Evan handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked. A warning, he said gravely, and some advice. Inside was a report from our intelligence division. Liam's company was on the verge of collapse. He'd overextended, overcommit, and was weeks away from bankruptcy. The only thing keeping him afloat was our parents' money and his own increasingly desperate lies. Also in the envelope was a handwritten note from Evan. You're building something extraordinary here. But remember, shadows can protect you while you grow, but eventually you'll need to step into the light. When that day comes, be ready to control the narrative. They'll all know your name soon enough. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and began the process of consolidating our companies under a new parent corporation. I established offshore accounts to protect our assets. I trademarked names, secured patents, and locked down our intellectual property. I wasn't just building a business anymore. I was building a fortress, a kingdom. And still, whenever I visited home, I was just Harper, the daughter who worked with computers and seemed to be doing okay. The contrast between my two worlds became almost comical. In one, I made decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions in revenue. In the other, my mother still asked if I'd considered going back to school for a real degree. "Your day will come," Leo assured me one evening as I returned from another frustrating family dinner. "And when it does, I hope I'm there to see it." "You will be," I promised. Front row seat. What neither of us knew was how soon that day would arrive. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy cream-colored cardstock in a gold-lined envelope, delivered by courier rather than regular mail because of course it was. Before I even opened it, I knew it was from Liam. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson request the honor of your presence at the engagement celebration of their son, Liam Wilson, to Miss Olivia Barrett." Below the flowery script was a handwritten note in Liam's distinctive scrawl, "Formal attire only. Wealth welcome." I laughed out loud, a bitter sound that echoed through my penthouse apartment, the one none of my family had ever visited. The one with the view of the city that cost more than my parents' house. Wealth welcome. As if wealth was an invited guest rather than the entire point of the celebration. "Something amusing?" Leo asked, looking up from his laptop where he'd been reviewing quarterly projections. I handed him the invitation. "My brother's getting engaged." Leo scanned the card, his eyebrow raising at Liam's note. Charming as ever. He set the invitation down. "Are you going to go?" That was the question, wasn't it? After years of building my empire in secret, of watching Liam falter while pretending he was succeeding, of being overlooked and underestimated by my entire family, was I finally ready to step out of the shadows? "I don't know," I admitted. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a family group chat notification. I rarely participated, but I still couldn't bring myself to leave it entirely. "Cousin Amber, OMG, Liam's engagement party is going to be at the Windsor Hotel. That place is insane. Aunt Susan, so proud of him, following in his father's footsteps. Cousin Tyler at Harper, you coming? Got a +1 yet, or still flying solo?" Winking face. Cousin Amber, does she even know what to wear to something like this? LOL. I put the phone down without responding. The familiar sting of their dismissal felt duller now, more like an echo of old pain rather than a fresh wound. Still, some part of me, the part that would always be the overlooked little sister, wavered. The next morning, I sat in my office, the invitation propped against my computer monitor. Through the glass walls, I could see my company humming with activity. Developers, analysts, project managers, all working on technology that was revolutionizing cybersecurity. All part of an empire I'd built, while my family thought I was still figuring things out. "You're distracted," Evan observed, dropping into the chair across from my desk. At 65, he moved with the energy of someone decades younger, his mind still the sharpest I knew. My brother's getting engaged. Evan knew all about Liam and my family. In the 3 years he'd been my mentor, he'd heard every story, witnessed every holiday gathering where I returned to play the role of unremarkable Harper. He said simply. "And you're wondering if it's time?" I nodded. Evan always could read me better than anyone except Leo. "I've built all of this in silence," I said, gesturing to the office beyond. "Part of me wants to keep it that way. Keep building. Wait until we go public next year." "And the other part?" I sighed. "The other part wants to walk into that party and watch their faces when they realize I've surpassed all of them while they were busy feeling sorry for me." Evan was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "I was going to give you this on your birthday next month, but now seems more appropriate." Inside was a photograph, me at 12 years old, standing next to my science fair project. In the picture, I was alone, no family crowding around to celebrate. But my eyes were bright with pride, with certainty, with the knowledge that I'd built something worthy. Across the bottom, Evan had written in his precise handwriting, "Time to take up space." I stared at the photo, feeling something shift within me. All these years, I'd been so focused on proving them wrong that I'd forgotten to claim my right to exist in their world. I'd been playing by their rules. Stay small, stay quiet, don't outshine Liam. Maybe it was time to play by my own. Thank you, I said, carefully tucking the photo back in its envelope. That afternoon, I left the office early, something I rarely did, and went shopping. Not at the usual boutiques where busy executives grabbed work attire, but at the high-end stores I normally avoided despite being able to afford them for years. The dress I chose was midnight blue, elegantly cut, subtly expensive in the way only the truly wealthy can recognize. It wasn't flashy, it didn't scream for attention. It simply declared its worth with quiet confidence. Next, I visited a car dealership. The sedan I drove was practical, reliable, and completely forgettable, perfect for my under-the-radar existence. The sleek, limited edition luxury car I selected was none of those things. It was a statement. Is this too much? I asked Leo that evening, showing him my purchases. Am I doing this for the wrong reasons? Leo considered the question seriously, as he did all questions. It was one of the things I loved about him. He never dismissed my concerns or offered placating reassurances. Revenge is a perfectly human motive, he said finally. But I don't think that's what this is about, not really. No. He shook his head. This is about stepping into your truth. You've been quiet long enough, Harper. Let them hear you without raising your voice. I leaned against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. What if they don't like what they see? Then that's their loss, he said simply. But you'll finally be seen. The real you. That night, I dreamed of a childhood memory I'd almost forgotten. I was 9, at a pool party for one of Liam's football teammates. I'd been reading quietly on a lounge chair when Liam and his friends spotted me. Hey, Harper, he called, grinning that charming grin that fooled everyone but me. Come here for a second. I approached cautiously. When I was within reach, he grabbed my arm and pushed me into the deep end of the pool, clothes, book, and all. As I surfaced, sputtering and humiliated, everyone laughed. Even our parents, who'd witnessed the whole thing, were chuckling. Lighten up, Harper, my father said as I climbed out, water streaming from my clothes. It was just a joke. In my dream, the scene played out differently. This time, when I surfaced from the water, I wasn't sputtering. I was smiling. This time, I reached out and pulled Liam in after me. This time, I was the one laughing. I woke up with a start, the dream still vivid. For a moment, I lay in the darkness of my bedroom, processing. Then I reached for my phone and typed a quick message to the family group chat. Looking forward to the engagement party. I'll be attending, with guest. It was time to stop drowning and start swimming. The next day, I had my assistant clear my schedule for the week of the party. I hired a stylist to complete my look. I made arrangements for Leo's tuxedo. I did all of this while running my company, closing a major acquisition, and preparing for a board meeting. 3 days before the party, a small package arrived at my office. Inside was an elegant jewelry box from a renowned designer. The note attached simply read, "For armor, not for show." L. Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings that matched my dress perfectly. Leo, who rarely made grand gestures, had somehow known exactly what I needed. Not flashy diamonds that screamed for attention, but something elegant and strong, like me. The night before the party, I visited the tiny, elegant box I'd purchased weeks ago. Inside was not jewelry or money or anything material. It was documentation, irrefutable proof of what I'd built, what I owned, and most significantly, the evidence that I now owned the majority stake in Liam's failing company through a series of shell corporations and strategic acquisitions. He didn't know it yet, but Liam Wilson now worked for his little sister. And tomorrow, everyone would know it too. As I closed the box and set it with my purse, my phone rang. It was Evan. "Are you ready?" he asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "I think so," I said. "Remember," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "tomorrow isn't about them. It's about you finally allowing yourself to be seen. The rest is just Collateral Revelation." I laughed at his choice of words. Collateral Revelation. I like that. You've earned this moment, Harper. Not because of what you've built, impressive as it is, but because of who you've become while building it. After we hung up, I stood by the window of my penthouse, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Liam was probably celebrating his last night as the golden child, the favorite, the successful one. He had no idea what was coming. I thought I'd feel nervous or vindictive or even sad. Instead, I felt calm, ready. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about finally taking up the space I deserved. I picked up the RSVP card one last time, running my finger over the words "Wealth Welcome." "Oh, Liam," I murmured to myself, a small smile playing at my lips. You have no idea. The day of Liam's engagement party arrived with picture-perfect weather, sunny and mild, as if even the elements were conspiring to make my brother's special day flawless. Fitting, really. Liam Wilson had always been blessed with good fortune, or at least that's what everyone believed. Leo adjusted his tie as we sat in my new car outside the Windsor Hotel. The historic building loomed before us, its limestone facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Valets in crisp uniforms scurried about, parking luxury vehicles that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. "Second thoughts?" Leo asked, noticing my hesitation. I smoothed the silk of my midnight blue dress and touched the sapphire earrings he'd given me. Not second thoughts. Just taking it in. This is the moment everything changes. He squeezed my hand. Remember, no matter what happens in there, you've already won. This is just formality. I nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped out as the valet opened my door. The young man's eyes widened slightly at my car, a limited edition that had only been released to select buyers. His reaction was a small preview of what was to come. As we walked toward the entrance, I spotted familiar faces from high school, distant relatives, and family friends. A few did double takes. One of my former classmates actually stopped mid-conversation, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips, as she tried to reconcile the Harper Wilson she remembered with the woman who now approached. "Is that Harper?" I heard someone whisper. "She looks different." Inside, the ballroom was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Floral arrangements worth thousands adorned every table. A string quartet played in the corner. It was exactly the kind of display Liam would choose. Opulent, obvious, designed to impress. "Harper." My mother's voice cut through the ambient chatter. She wore an expensive but somewhat dated dress, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile strained. She air-kissed my cheek, barely making contact. "You actually came. And you look appropriate." The closest thing to a compliment she could manage. I simply smiled. "This is Leo," I said, introducing the man beside me. My mother's eyes flickered with interest as she took in Leo's bespoke suit and quiet confidence. "Oh! And what do you do, Leo?" "Financial analysis," he replied smoothly. "For Harper's company." Before my mother could process that, she was called away by a caterer with some urgent question about the appetizers. She hurried off with a distracted, "Enjoy yourselves. Your father's around somewhere." Leo and I made our way deeper into the party. I spotted my father holding court with some of his business associates, gesturing grandly as they laughed at whatever story he was telling. When he saw me, his expression flickered briefly with surprise before settling back into polite acknowledgement. A nod, nothing more. Classic Wilson family welcome. We found a quiet spot near one of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the hotel gardens. A waiter offered champagne. I accepted, more to have something to do with my hands than from any desire to drink. "That's her, isn't it?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar but warm. "You must be Harper." I turned to find a striking woman in her early 30s regarding me with intelligent eyes. Her gown was tasteful rather than flashy, her jewelry minimal but exquisite. "Olivia Barrett," she said, extending her hand. "Your future sister-in-law, apparently. I liked her immediately, the wry note in her voice when she said apparently, the directness of her gaze. She wasn't what I expected for Liam. Nice to meet you, I said, shaking her hand. This is Leo. The mysterious sister, Olivia mused, ignoring the people trying to catch her attention. Liam doesn't talk about you much. I'm not surprised. Olivia studied my face. He should. You're far more interesting than most of the people here. She glanced around the room with a subtle but unmistakable hint of disdain. I hope we'll have a chance to talk properly sometime. Without all this. Before I could respond, Liam materialized at her side, slipping his arm possessively around her waist. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than he could afford, his smile as practiced and hollow as ever. Harper, he said, his tone thick with condescension. You made it. And you clean up okay. His gaze slid to Leo, assessing, then dismissing him in the space of a heartbeat. Found yourself a date, I see. Leo, I corrected. My partner. Partner, Liam repeated, smirking. How modern. What do you do, Leo? Let me guess. IT support. Leo smiled pleasantly. Investment strategy, actually. I help Harper manage her portfolio. Liam's eyebrows rose fractionally. Portfolio? Well. My little sister has a few stocks. Moving up in the world. Something like that, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. Olivia shot Liam a look I couldn't quite interpret, somewhere between annoyance and curiosity. He either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. Well, enjoy the champagne, Liam said. It's the good stuff. $1,200 a bottle. He winked. Some of us can afford the finer things. As he steered Olivia away, I heard her murmur, was that necessary? His response was lost in the crowd. The next hour passed in a blur of superficial conversations and barely concealed curiosity. I moved through the party with Leo beside me, fielding questions from relatives who suddenly found me worth talking to now that I was well-dressed and accompanied by an attractive man. What exactly do you do again, Harper? Aunt Susan asked, her eyes wandering to the sapphires at my ears. Software security, I replied. Oh, she said, clearly disappointed by the mundane answer. Is that going well for you? It pays the bills. Several times, I overheard whispers as I passed. Cousins speculating about my dress. Do you think it's rented? Childhood acquaintances wondering about Leo. How did she land him? Relatives expressing surprise at my transformation. She actually looks like a Wilson tonight. None of it stung the way it once would have. Their opinions felt small, inconsequential. I'd outgrown the need for their approval, without them even noticing I'd changed. At precisely 7 o'clock, a chime rang through the ballroom. The string quartet fell silent. All eyes turned to the small stage where Liam now stood, microphone in hand, Olivia at his side, looking politely attentive if not entirely comfortable. Friends, family, esteemed colleagues, Liam began, his voice carrying that artificial warmth he'd perfected over years of being the center of attention. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Olivia and me as we embark on this next chapter. He launched into a speech about love and partnership and shared visions for the future. It sounded rehearsed, generic, like something he'd copied from a best engagement speeches website. Olivia's smile remained fixed, though her eyes occasionally darted to the exit as if calculating the distance. Then Liam's tone shifted. As many of you know, I've always been a firm believer in ambition. In setting goals and crushing them. In building something meaningful. My father nodded approvingly from his spot near the front. My mother beamed. Success isn't an accident, Liam continued. It's a choice. A daily decision to excel where others settle for mediocrity. A knowing chuckle rippled through the crowd. Several of Liam's friends raised their glasses in agreement. Some of us are simply wired to achieve. To build empires. To create wealth and influence. Liam's gaze swept the room before settling, briefly but unmistakably, on me. And some just stay average. More laughter, louder this time. My parents didn't join in, but they smiled indulgently, as they always did when Liam pushed boundaries. Leo's hand found mine, squeezing gently. I squeezed back, but kept my expression neutral. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. To my beautiful fiancé, Liam raised his glass. Who had the wisdom to choose a winner? Applause filled the room as he kissed Olivia. If anyone noticed her slightly stiff posture or the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, they didn't comment on it. As the clapping subsided, people began to mingle again. Waiters circulated with fresh champagne. The quartet resumed playing. The moment of tension and opportunity seemed to have passed. But I was done waiting. With calm, deliberate steps, I made my way toward the stage. Leo followed a few paces behind, giving me space but staying close enough for support. As I approached, conversations nearby hushed. Heads turned. Liam, in the middle of accepting congratulations from a cluster of admirers, saw me coming. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. "Excuse me," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The circle around Liam reluctantly parted. My brother's expression was a mixture of irritation and condescension. "Something to add, sis?" he asked, his tone making it clear he expected nothing of value. "Actually, yes." I smiled. "I brought a little something for the groom." From my clutch, I withdrew the elegant box I'd prepared. Small, unassuming, life-changing. Liam looked at it with vague suspicion. "You didn't have to get me anything, Harper." "Oh, but I did." I held it out to him. "Open it." Maybe it was the unfamiliar confidence in my voice. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Whatever the reason, Liam took the box, his movements cautious, as if it might contain something embarrassing. As he lifted the lid, his expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Inside lay a single document, the cover page of a merger agreement, with highlighted sections showing the new ownership structure of his company. "What is this?" he asked, the earlier smugness gone from his voice. "Documentation," I replied calmly. "Of the company I bought from under you 6 months ago, and a personal note." I nodded toward the folded card beneath the document. The room had gone utterly silent. Even the quartet had stopped playing, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Everyone was watching now. My parents, Olivia, distant relatives, Liam's friends. All eyes on the golden boy and his invisible sister. With visibly unsteady hands, Liam unfolded the note. As he read, the color drained from his face. His eyes darted back to the merger document, then to me, disbelief warring with dawning horror. "This is a joke," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Check the signatures," I suggested mildly. "You'll find they're all quite real." He flipped through the pages, stopping at the final one where the authorizing signatures were displayed. "I don't understand," he said, his voice now barely audible. "How did you?" "I may exist quietly," I said, repeating the words from my note, but I never stood still. "Congratulations on your engagement, Liam." I paused, letting the moment stretch. "P.S. You now work for me." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a champagne bubble pop. Then Olivia, of all people, let out a short, surprised laugh. She quickly covered her mouth, but her eyes were bright with what looked suspiciously like approval. And just like that, the carefully constructed facade of Liam Wilson's life began to crack. The silence lasted only seconds before the room erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Liam's close friend Bradley saying loudly, "What the hell?" Someone dropped a glass, the crash barely audible over the rising tide of voices. Liam himself seemed frozen, the documents clutched in his hand, his face a mask of shock and fury. He took a step backward, nearly stumbling. "This is impossible," he managed finally. "You're lying. You're nothing but a junior software developer?" I finished for him. The quiet sister who was never going anywhere? The one who wasn't cut out for wealth? I smiled. "Check your email." The official notification of management changes went out an hour ago. My mother pushed through the crowd, her perfect coiffure now slightly askew, her expression wild. "Harper, what have you done?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "What is this?" "Business, Mom," I replied calmly. "Just business." "It must be a joke," my father said, appearing at my mother's side. He reached for the papers in Liam's hands. "Let me see those." As he scanned the documents, his face darkened. My father might have been blinded by favoritism, but he wasn't stupid. He'd been in business long enough to recognize a legitimate contract when he saw one. "These seem to be in order," he admitted, his voice strained. He looked up at me with new eyes, not with pride, exactly, but with a grudging reassessment. "How did you manage this?" Before I could answer, Liam seemed to snap out of his stupor. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You ruined me," he shouted, his composure shattered. "You sneaky, backstabbing." "I'd choose your next words carefully," Leo interrupted, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable warning as he stepped between us. "You're creating quite a scene at your own engagement party." Liam looked around wildly, suddenly remembering where we were. Dozens of guests were watching open-mouthed. Phones had appeared in hands, no doubt recording. His carefully cultivated image of success was unraveling in real time. "Is this true?" It was Olivia who spoke, her eyes fixed on the documents now in my father's hands. "Liam's company is yours?" TechFusion Holdings acquired majority control 6 months ago, I confirmed. "Along with 3 of his subsidiaries." 6 months. Olivia repeated. She turned to Liam, her expression hardening. "You told me the company was thriving. That we were financially secure." Liam's face flushed. "We are. This is just a misunderstanding. A temporary situation." "Actually," I said, "it's quite permanent." The board voted unanimously last week to restructure management. Effective immediately. A tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s detached himself from the crowd. "Is that why you called me yesterday?" he asked Liam. "To get emergency funding?" "You said it was for expansion." Liam's expression was answer enough. Slowly, deliberately, Olivia removed the enormous diamond ring from her finger and placed it on a nearby table. "I think I need some air," she said quietly, then walked away without a backward glance. "Olivia, wait." Liam started after her, but his friend Bradley caught his arm. "Dude, damage control," he muttered. "Everyone is watching." Indeed, they were. The crowd had formed a loose circle around our family drama, expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed delight at witnessing such a spectacular fall from grace. My mother's face had crumpled into confusion and distress. "I don't understand," she said, turning to me. "How could you do this to your brother? To your family?" "I didn't do this to hurt anyone," I replied honestly. "I built something valuable." The fact that it intersected with Liam's business interests was coincidental. A lie, but a necessary one. This wasn't the time or place to unpack years of resentment and calculated moves. "Coincidental?" Liam spat. "You deliberately targeted my company." "Your failing company," I corrected. "The one you've been propping up with Dad's money and investor lies for the past 2 years." Several people in expensive suits exchanged glances at this. Potential investors, probably. Ones Liam had been courting with promises of imminent success. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Liam insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I do. Your burn rate exceeds revenue by 43%. Your last 3 product launches failed to meet projections. Your technical infrastructure is outdated, and your best developers have been quietly interviewing elsewhere for months." I shrugged. Basic due diligence. My father was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "How big is your company, Harper?" he asked, his voice oddly subdued. "Current valuation is just under $2 billion, I said. Pre-IPO. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. $2 billion. More than my father had made in his entire career. More than Liam could have hoped to achieve with his floundering startups and flashy pitches. "That's not possible," my mother whispered. "It's not only possible, Mrs. Wilson, it's fact." It was Evan, materializing at the edge of the crowd. Despite not being invited, he'd come anyway, slipping in quietly to witness the moment he'd helped me prepare for. Your daughter is one of the most respected innovators in cybersecurity. She just doesn't use her real name professionally. And you are? My father demanded. Evan Thompson. I've had the privilege of working with Harper for the past 3 years. Recognition dawned on my father's face. Everyone in tech knew Evan Thompson, the legendary pioneer who disappeared from public view years ago. You've been working with my daughter? No, Evan corrected. I've been working for your daughter as her chief technology advisor. This revelation sent another ripple through the crowd. Phones were furiously tapping now, no doubt searching my name, trying to connect it to whatever tech success they'd missed. But you always said you were just doing computer stuff, my mother said accusingly, as if my success were some kind of personal betrayal. Small projects, freelance work. You never asked for details, I pointed out. You were too busy asking when I'd get a real job or settle down. A flash of guilt crossed her face. We were concerned about you. You seemed so directionless. I had direction, I said quietly. It just wasn't the direction you valued. The confrontation might have continued, but at that moment, Olivia returned, her expression composed if slightly flushed. She walked directly to me, ignoring Liam's attempt to intercept her. I'd like to talk, she said. Privately. As I followed her to a quiet corner of the ballroom, I heard my father asking Leo rapid-fire questions about financials, valuations, market position. Leo's answers were polite but deliberately vague, professional courtesy, even now. You should have told me, Olivia said once we were relatively alone. Before I accepted his proposal. We've never met before today, I reminded her. And Liam and I aren't exactly close. She gave a short, humorless laugh. No, I gathered that. She glanced back at the chaos we'd left behind. He told me his sister was a nobody. That you resented his success. He believed that, I said. It was easier than admitting he never bothered to see who I really was. Olivia studied me intently. You know what the strangest part is? I'm not even surprised. There was always something off about his success stories. Too rehearsed. Too perfect. She twisted her bare ring finger absently. I should have trusted my instincts. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. This wasn't about hurting you. I know. She straightened her shoulders. Honestly, you should have treated him worse. You offered him an entry-level job, right? That was in your note. I nodded, surprised she knew that detail. You should have fired him outright, she said, then smiled slightly at my expression. What? I'm not a trophy wife, Harper. I run a nonprofit with a $10 million annual budget. I know how business works. Why were you with him? I couldn't help asking. Her smile faded. He was charming, attentive, and I believed he was building something meaningful. She sighed. Lesson learned. As she walked away, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Liam had lost more than his company today. He'd lost someone who might have genuinely cared for him if he'd been honest with her. When I returned to the main group, the dynamic had shifted. My father was deep in conversation with Evan, his expression intense. Several of Liam's business associates had gravitated toward Leo, handing him cards, clearly hoping for introductions to the mysterious tech founder they'd overlooked. My mother stood alone, looking lost. Mom, I said softly, approaching her. She turned, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice small. All this time. Would you have believed me? I asked. Or would you have told me I was exaggerating? That I should learn from Liam's example. Her silence was answer enough. I didn't need your praise, I told her. I just needed you to see me. Really see me. Not as Liam's shadow or the daughter who didn't quite fit your expectations. I see you now, she whispered. I'm sorry it took all this. It wasn't a complete apology. It didn't address years of dismissal, of favoritism, of conditional love. But it was a start. A crack in the facade, just like the one in Liam's carefully constructed image. Speaking of Liam, he'd retreated to the bar, surrounded by a dwindling circle of friends. His face was flushed with alcohol and humiliation, his tie loosened, his perfect appearance deteriorating by the minute. When he saw me looking, he raised his glass in a bitter toast. "Congratulations, sis," he called, his voice slurred. "You ruined my engagement party." "You did that yourself," I replied, not unkindly. "When you built your life on lies." "Oh, and you're so perfect," he scoffed. "Miss Secret Billionaire? Playing the victim all these years while plotting against me." "I never plotted against you, Liam. I built something for myself. The fact that you see that as an attack says more about you than me." He laughed, harsh and brittle. "So what now? You want me begging for a job? Working for my little sister?" I considered him for a moment, my golden brother now tarnished by his own choices. Part of me had imagined this moment differently. In my fantasies, I'd offered him an entry-level position, watching him squirm at the role reversal. But standing here now, seeing the genuine pain beneath his bravado, I found I no longer wanted that. "No," I said finally. "That was a mistake on my part. You're not suited for my company culture." Relief flickered across his face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "So what then?" "So nothing. Your company is now under new management. You'll receive a fair severance package. What you do with it is your choice." I turned to walk away, but his voice stopped me. "I don't get it," he said, genuine confusion breaking through the anger. "If this wasn't about revenge, why reveal it like this? Why not tell us privately?" I looked back at him, at the brother who had never really seen me. "Because I needed all of you to understand, I was never invisible. You just weren't paying attention." 3 weeks after Liam's disastrous engagement party, I stood outside my parents' house, hesitating before ringing the doorbell. The modest suburban home looked smaller somehow, less imposing than it had when I was growing up. "You don't have to do this," Leo said from beside me. "We could still catch that flight to Milan." I smiled at him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I know, but I need to close this chapter properly." When my mother opened the door, she looked older, more subdued. The perfectly maintained facade was showing cracks, her hair less immaculately styled, her clothes more casual. "Harper," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "Come in. Your father's in the den." The house smelled the same, my mother's signature pot roast, the faint pine scent of the furniture polish she'd always used. Some things hadn't changed. My father rose when we entered the den, extending his hand to Leo before turning to me. The gesture was awkward, formal, as if he wasn't quite sure how to interact with his daughter now that their positions had so dramatically reversed. "Harper," he said, "we've been reading about you. Your company. It's impressive." Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you," I said simply. We sat, the four of us, in a silence heavy with unspoken words. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring. My father cleared his throat several times. "Liam's left town," my mother finally said. "He's gone to stay with your uncle in Seattle for a while." I nodded, unsurprised. Disappearing was easier than facing the consequences of his actions. "The wedding's off," she continued. "Olivia returned all the gifts." A pause. "She called me, you know. Said some things about Liam. About how we raised him." "Mom," I started, not wanting this to become another session of Liam-focused conversation. She held up her hand. "No, let me finish." She was right. We didn't do him any favors, always praising him, making excuses for him. Her eyes met mine, truly met them, perhaps for the first time in years. "And we didn't see you." "I didn't see you. I'm sorry." The words I'd waited so long to hear. They didn't magically heal old wounds, but they created space for something new to grow. "I never needed to be the favorite," I said quietly. "I just needed to be seen. To be valued for who I actually was, not who you wished I would be." My father shifted uncomfortably. "We were wrong," he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. About both of you. We thought we knew what success looked like. He gave a small, rueful smile. Clearly, we didn't. We talked for hours, really talked, perhaps for the first time. About my company. About the years of building in silence. About why I'd kept it all secret. Not just to surprise Liam, but because I'd needed to prove to myself that I could do it without their validation, without anyone's approval but my own. I'd like you to meet someone, I said finally. The mentor who believed in me when no one else did. My father's eyes lit with interest. Evan Thompson? I've been reading his papers from the early days of internet security. Brilliant man. He's more than brilliant, I said. He's kind. He saw potential in me when everyone else saw nothing much. As we prepared to leave, my mother hugged me, really hugged me. Not the perfunctory embrace I'd grown accustomed to. We're proud of you, she whispered. Not because of what you've built or how much it's worth, but because you did it your way, despite us. It wasn't perfect reconciliation. There were too many years of hurt for that. But it was honest, a foundation we might actually be able to build on. The following month, I launched the Wilson Initiative for Women in Tech, a mentorship program designed to help girls and young women who, like me, might be overlooked by traditional support systems. The program provided scholarships, internships, and direct mentoring from successful women in the industry. At the launch event, a young reporter raised her hand during the Q&A. Ms. Wilson, you operated in near total anonymity for years, building one of the most successful cybersecurity firms without public recognition. Why did you decide to step into the spotlight now? I considered the question carefully. I stayed silent because I was busy building. First my company, then my confidence. Now I'm building opportunities for others, and that requires visibility. The answer satisfied the room, but it was only part of the truth. The full truth was more complex, about finding peace with my own story, about realizing that invisibility had served its purpose, but was no longer serving me or the people I wanted to help. After the event, a woman approached me, someone vaguely familiar from my childhood. Harper? It's me, Jessica Winters. We were in the same science club in middle school. Memory clicked into place. Jessica had been the only one who'd really looked at my science fair project all those years ago, who'd asked thoughtful questions while everyone else rushed to see Liam's football trophies. I remember, I said, smiling. You were working on sustainable energy alternatives. Her eyes widened with surprise and pleasure. You remember that? That was 15 years ago. It was impressive, I said simply. I notice impressive things. Jessica laughed. Well, I'm still working on sustainable energy. Not quite as successfully as you've tackled cybersecurity, but I'm making progress. She hesitated. Actually, I've been developing a security protocol for smart grid implementations. I'd love to get your input sometime. We exchanged information, promising to meet for coffee. Another connection rebuilt, another piece of my past reframed not as a time of invisibility, but as the foundation for who I'd become. As for Liam, true to form, he vanished from public view. Rumors circulated that he was launching a new venture in Seattle, that he'd gone to work for a competitor, that he'd left tech entirely. I chose not to follow these stories. His path was his to walk now, separate from mine. Leo and I married 6 months later. Not a grand society wedding like Liam had planned, but an intimate gathering of people who truly knew and valued us. Evan gave a toast that made everyone laugh and me cry. My parents attended, still somewhat awkward, but genuinely trying. Even Olivia came, now heading an expanded version of her nonprofit with seed funding from my foundation. That night, as Leo slept beside me, I found myself thinking about the photo Evan had given me, 12-year-old Harper, standing proudly next to her science project, alone but undaunted. I got up quietly and went to my desk, taking out a notepad. Dear younger me, I wrote. They told you that you were invisible, but they were wrong. You were always shining. They just weren't looking in your direction. Their blindness was never your failure. The path ahead is harder than you imagine, but also more rewarding. You'll build something extraordinary, Not out of spite or revenge, but because creation is in your nature. You'll find people who see you clearly, who value not just what you can do, but who you are. The hurt doesn't completely go away. Old wounds leave scars. But those scars become part of your strength. They remind you of what you overcame, of how far you've come. Most importantly, you'll learn that taking up space isn't selfish. That being seen isn't vanity. That your voice matters not despite your quietness, but because of the depth it contains. They used to laugh when you said you had plans. Now they quote you in boardrooms. But that was never the point, was it? The point was always to build something that matters. And you did. You will. With love and pride, your future self. I folded the letter and slipped it into the frame with the photograph, a message across time that would never be sent, but had somehow already been received. The quiet girl with the science project had always known her worth. She just needed time to show the world. And now, finally, the world was paying attention.